Once around the park, James, and don't spare the horses.
Well, can I just say off the top that as we record this, it's celebrating the big 01 for grandson James today. So it's a benchmark day. He woke up this morning and had his very first pancake breakfast. I mean, what history is that, right? How's that? As he enters his second year on the planet. That's all just the excitement. So I think I just wanted to get the priorities straight before we get into some down in the weeds conversations. Welcome in. It's On the Ledge here with Sabrina and Angie. She is the, I guess, what's your title at as opposed to, chief bottle washer, et cetera. What are you, the editor-in-chief, the CEO? Well, how do we...
We could say founder, I think.
Founder for sure, we can.
Reporter,
I saw your note there yesterday. 6 months. So that's that. How has that been, by the way, that first 6 months? Because you and I were talking about this a little earlier. We journalists aren't really good at being entrepreneurs. And so, taking the leap like that for your part, I think is laudable first, but brave considering the circumstances of really launching a business during the pandemic.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been a labor of love, but yeah, it's been a wild ride so far for 6 months. I mean, there's been some growing pains, some bumps along the way, but I'm grateful for everything, and the support has been amazing. And yeah, it's been really good. It's been fun. They're not going to get rid of me anytime soon at Queen's Park. I'm looking forward to the campaign coming up. So yeah, I'll be bugging the government for hopefully some more months to come.
Well, when you talk about the campaign to come, and I'd just be curious to get your take and Keith's take, particularly on how you see coverage of this campaign rolling out, because we've talked in the past about the changes in access to ministers, the premier, even just to MPPs after a question period. We don't have the scrums in the hall, all those sorts of things where, the average person consuming news from Queen's Park probably doesn't realize how much of a significant shift there has been just in the ability, never mind the format of covering what's going on. So what sense do you have as you kind of approach campaign season, Sabrina, in terms of how things are going to unfold?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm going to be on my toes. You're right. It's a lot harder to get access to people now. It's a lot more difficult and not as organic to talk to people, just even off the cuff, or to get people, but behind the scenes kind of thing, which, during a campaign time, I mean, some of that coverage is more important. You can, kind of veer away from the party's talking points. But, I think it could go both ways. Like, we don't really know what the spring will look like if hopefully a lot of people are vaccinated. I don't think anyone in the gallery or any reporter would have a problem with, maybe showing proof of that to get on a media bus. We have no confirmation that there will be media buses, and we'll get to follow all the campaigns closely. But I'm hoping they bring them back, and it works in the government and all the political parties' favor too, to have the journalists there covering them day in and day out, locally and even from the gallery, people that know the issues. So I have high hopes that we're going to get some more access. I think it will work in especially the government's favor as well. To have people there while they're out, trying to get reelected. So I guess we'll see how it goes, but it's early days yet. And I'm sure, us in the gallery, on the gallery executive, especially, will be like talking and negotiating with the political parties, probably early next year, as soon as we can.
Yeah, but even the format that we've sort of fallen into over an abundance of caution, Keith, has been this idea that you are keeping your distance, or you're on the phone, or you're remote somehow. You get one question and one follow-up. And that just does not lend itself to the kind of coverage that I know you have done and I used to do, covering campaigns over the years. It's just it's an insulated setup where everybody kind of stays in their lane, and you're almost fed a question as a reporter now. It's not like the old days where my first question might have been, "Can you please answer Keith's question?"
It's changed so completely with the COVID protocols. Are they're going to last long after COVID because the politicians love them. I doubt very much the Progressive Conservatives and Premier Ford will put on a bus. And I also doubt very much, even if they did, that the media would be willing to pay thousands of dollars a seat a week to get one question if you're lucky. He's only going to have one available if you're lucky, and chances are he's not going to have the available. The Conservatives much prefer to jump over the head of the gallery, speak directly to people, live stream their stuff, go on social media, hammer home their own messages. That's what they're going to do. I doubt very much he's going to put on a campaign bus. I was of mixed minds of campaign buses, so I wasn't really that outraged when Ford didn't put one on. I was interested to see how it would happen, how it would evolve, and I think campaigns are going to continue to evolve in this respect. You might see a bus for 1 or 2 weeks. You might see, okay, this week we're going north, so we'll have the plane on this week. Anyone wants to come on the plane, but you're not going to buy that full, what we used to call it, the full season ticket or the full flight, like the Canadian Press and some of them. We would just come in CBC. We'd buy the whole shebang. Others, no, you're going to come on for maybe 2 or 3 days. So they'll just put events on for those 2 or 3 days, or put buses or plane or whatever it will be. That's my prediction. It's more economical for all. And the media realize, we're not getting the messages on the buses anyway. We're getting what we're fed, and that's it. So a new way of covering them, it's up to them to present a new way that will come to their events, that will actually decide to go. And the best way to get us to go is availability. It's all we ask.
Yeah. Well, and I think, let's get into the politics of the week. And I think, John, I thought of you as this story evolved through the week, because you will always, begin the conversation. Let's put the political lens on why they're doing this. And I think the whole 413 discussion is brilliant politics. Mm-hmm. You may not agree with the need for a highway, but immediately this week they have not only driven the news cycle here, they have actually created a narrative that says this is going to be and debatable on the campaign. And I don't know why necessarily it has to be, but the media is buying this message right away. So I think that they, whether intentional or not, they have scored a lot of political points just by waving the flag for 413.
Well, there's a political calculus in this. It's, I think, pretty simple. First of all, the Ford government doesn't require Toronto to vote in favor of its policies in order to get a majority government. The second thing is we have Mr. Del Duca, who living in a particular region and having some questionable issues around his own zoning issues. It has a difficulty in criticizing certain things. But I think, I think it's pretty simple. What you do is you say the gateway to Ottawa and the gateway to Queen's Park is held by a ring of voters around the outside of the donut. Like, that's kind of it. And if you want to get the majority, that's where you got to go. So what they've done is they've created a ballot question. Are you for or are you against? Secondly, they've obviously done research. And I look, research is a guidepost. I mean, there's every political campaign that has run over the last 3 decades, it's relied on public opinion to guide them in a particular direction. But you know what? It did in the last federal election, and look where it got them. I mean, at the end of the day, there are adults in the room who make decisions on what to do. So clearly their going in strategy is, we're going to take the 905. We hear from them that they're tired of politicians saying no, no, no. So we're going to underline a campaign that says yes, yes, yes. We're going to divide them into a ballot question of either, somewhat, very much support, very much, somewhat disagree, and they're going to put that together. And they're going to campaign right there. What does it say to the rest of Toronto? What does it say to the rest of the province? And it's kind of like, we're taking you for granted. We've already done that calculus. It touches on the other thing the three of you journalists were talking about, though, and that is, we now have a public that's pretty tempered in the way in which they've been used to receiving information from politicians. We've had 22 months or 20 months of embedded society where they're used to, this is the format which you get the information. Secondly, the campaigning is going to be very different. It's all narrowcasted. The vast, vast majority of funds are now spent on Facebook and on places like that. I mean, the real knife fight is below the surface. So I don't mean to sort of say that the four of us on this are dinosaurs from a previous era, because we just saw some real advertising on TV to soften up the ground because they had to before these new things came in. But they're fighting a campaign that is below the surface. And that is where the campaign goes And the avails of a premier are factored into a very small window that, in fact, I think COVID has now produced an acceptance of. It used to be, come out from hiding. He's hiding. He's on the bus. He won't come out and answer questions. I think that's changed now. People have now seen that there's a different way, and that's what their expectations are at the moment.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about that sort of that narrow casting. I mean, we were talking to Brett James at Sussex Strategy during the federal campaign, and they have really mastered the ability to almost create a platform presentation that has, your name on it, Sabrina. They're able to create this content and get it into your inbox, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or whatever it happens to be. And that's where they're making their inroads. And it just completely, you talk about a ring road around Toronto. It creates a ring road around the media in some cases to be able to just get you where you want to go. And bang, now you're talking to me personally. And they do so without the filter of you or Keith.
Yeah, I mean, we even heard the premier kind of doing that, this week too, when he was up there touting these highways with, not really a lot of detail on, the timing and the costing of all of this, which would matter to voters, I think, to make a decision. This is obviously a way that they see themselves getting reelected, but he started, calling out downtown ideologues, essentially, saying, I'm talking to the people who live here. You can't just hop on your bicycle like the folks in downtown Toronto, and can't tell people here, get in your horse and buggy and start driving. I don't know who's actually.
I didn't quite understand that reference. I didn't get that.
The cheese off the cracker.
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I love a good Fordism. I think we love all these phrases from the premier. But yeah, no, I mean, there's a point, right? It's pointed, and he does this all the time. I love getting out of the Toronto bubble. I think there's going to be a lot more of that we're going to hear from them for sure.
And no facts. Why use facts when you can say, 30 minutes, this highway's going to save you 30 minutes when the study says 30 seconds? We've had an environmental impact. It was 25 years old, but we've done that. It's been done. Come on. This is, it's someone put it, slogans are so much easier than actual ideas.
Well, and he's in that business. Let's be fair. He's in the bumper sticker business. So
Is he ever? And I think that this debate, the people in that area are going to hear, I'm going to save a half hour because they're spending 90 minutes on a one-way commute at times. That's huge. That is a huge appeal. The experts say you're going to save, 30 seconds, maybe a minute on your drive. That's not going to get heard. It's going to get lost in all this.
But it means a couple of things, and that is that the battlefield is the 905, so that's been declared. It's not anywhere else. We know what the issue is, so where are the opposition parties on that? I mean, it's not only that they're going to have to fight that, but more importantly, if they fight it, they make it more of an intense ballot question. So they're going to have to find, as we would say in our business, change the channel and turn up the volume. So there's going to have to be either something else there to which you're working with. And I know there is some difference between some of the mayors, because we've heard them on News Talk and other places this week, but I'm not sure whether that's, it's a fundamental strategy. Are you going to take them on there, or are you going to create a completely different issue that's going to overtake that and become a bigger ballot question for them? So that's a bigger issue for the opposition parties. And secondly, I know that he's deftly basically said that anybody who's criticizing this is just from the downtown core of some, part of the country that doesn't care about anybody who lives outside of it. It's going to be pretty tough to fight that perception inside of the city. So they're going to have to take their social media, the opposition parties, right to that very spot. And they're going to have to it's going to be a very local campaign, I think. They're going to have to get into the councils and the people there to get them going in order to say, by proxy, this is a bad thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that at some level, literally in this case, politics really is always going to be local. And that's how you're going to have to drill down on it. But just as context here, as this discussion was going on over the past week or so, yesterday, I made the drive down to Strathroy to pick up my mom, and she's here to celebrate James's birthday. So this was all good. But on the way, I picked up her brother who wanted to visit with her. The longest part of my ride almost was traveling from the Don Valley Parkway and the 401 to Avenue Road and the 401. It was just, that took me 45 minutes. And then it took me less than 2 hours after that to get to her place, which is just outside of London. But you know, when I was coming back, and it was in the middle of the afternoon, and we're in the express lanes, and every other vehicle is a truck. And it's funny, you talk about the mayors, John. I heard the mayor on from Halton Hills talking to John Moore. And he said something that I've been thinking about or talking about for a long time, and that is, why don't we take all of these trucks that aren't stopping in Toronto, they're bypassing, they're going through, they're all in the express lanes for a reason. Why don't we put them on the 407, free up that space, because we know we can land an aircraft on the 407 in the middle of the day, so it's not like there's congestion up there. How much would that change, even if you had to pay for that toll? Change productivity. How much time would that take off your ride through, the west end of Toronto, coming in from, Milton or whatever it might be? So to me, I think there's an ability here to address what the premier is saying, but the opposition parties are going to have to be creative. Here's a great idea, and we can make it better. Here's how we would do this, and here's why we would do this. By the way, when we're going to build the Bradford Bypass or the 413, we're also going to put LRT tracks in here, or make it an option for GO buses or something like that. If you want to take them on the transportation ticket, Keith, I think you're going to have to go bigger than they're already making it to be.
Well, that's it. And they've laid out, they always turn to, when they complain about Toronto, say, look, we've taken care of the subways are coming. We're putting all our money there, huge infrastructure money there. We're doing it elsewhere here. I think the fight against, if you really want to fight against this highway, as the opposition party seem to do, it's going to have to be mainly on environmental grounds and some other alternatives as well that will get their attention. But I think there are some strong environmental aspects to this that are, the Tories are absolutely wanting to gloss over. But just this whole starting point, this is, as you said, a manufactured ballot question. There's no there at this point. There's no facts. There's no dollar figures. There's no construction shovels in the ground estimate. There's nothing other than, we're going to build this. We promise the Conservative government will build this. And the Liberals and NDP are forced to react to it. As you said, it's a brilliant strategy. The opposition parties are going to be forced to deal with it in some way. But I don't know. As I say, I think environmental grounds are going to be the one that, if they're going to flat out oppose building this highway, the environmental grounds, and then that's going to come back and feed into Ford's downtown elites. And you can see the Ford strategy here on so many issues. They so badly bundled the second wave of COVID in long-term care. I mean, they deserve to be pilloried for it. It's just horrendous what happened there, and it's the government's fault. Slow reactions, delayed reactions, non-reactions, and yet now they're going to be announcing a new long-term care home locally, a local one, at least one a week until the election day. They're now announcing their strategies for electric vehicles and battery manufacturers. They're all on side with EVs. No, not the rebates. Those were for millionaires. But they've got each issue that they either screwed up or were on the wrong side of, and are going to portray themselves as being on the right side of as they move into the campaign. This is their strategy now, and quite frankly, it's pretty effective. It could work absolutely for this government to rehabilitate its image, especially the long-term care stuff, because you said everything is local. If I'm going to get a new long-term care home locally, I'm going to be focused more on that and where my family could go, as opposed to what happened, and other than the families that were, the thousands of families that were literally destroyed, that lost loved ones during COVID, needlessly, especially in that second wave. So this government's got some strategies, and as I say, I think they're very effective. And remember, that environmental thing that I said, is the target, their Ontario Environment Minister, hands up anyone who can name him, was at COP26 in Glasgow. Didn't say a word. What was the point of that? That sums up their environmental policy to me right there.
So, Sabrina, when we look at the sort of that checklist of things other than the highway, again, things that kind of went under the radar this week. I think this optometrist story is one of those things that, if this had been our general practitioners or dentists or somebody that we might see more often than, going in for a vision test, this would blow up. And the idea that they haven't had a deal in, 10 years, something like that, that's one of those things that I can see should be to the surface. Your whole piece on the negotiations going on around childcare with the feds, there's another front and center issue that really is going to hit people in the pocketbook. So there seems to be a lot out there. I mean, can they keep up with all of these issues as they pop up? I mean, it's going to be like whack-a-mole.
Yeah, I mean, it's just on those on childcare and even the optometrists, it's kind of like we're just in a holding pattern right now, and there's just a lot of back and forth happening between all these parties. So, yeah, I mean, for a journalist, like it's kind of like we kind of want to like move the plot forward here a little bit. Like obviously, there's not much movement on the childcare deal with Ottawa right now, and we're getting all these numbers that what Ottawa has offered Ontario is really 3 billion short of what Ontario really needs. And Ottawa, you have Ottawa, fighting back and saying that the provincial government is not using the right numbers there. But at the end of the day, there's just still no deal. And then on the optometrist side, yeah, now we have Gila Martow, someone from the government's own bench calling them out, saying that she's an optometrist and this is putting her in an awkward position because she's calling them out for being unprepared. She basically accused the health ministry of not showing up to an opportunity with the association that they're fighting in negotiations with right now, stalled negotiations with, that they had this opportunity to talk about the true cost of the eye exams and the real funding, and they turned it down. And now you have their own MPP saying that clearly they were unprepared for these negotiations where seniors and children like aren't getting eye exams in the meantime. So I think maybe because it was a constituency week also played a part in that too. We didn't have a question period. We didn't have the opposition, hounding the government on some of this stuff. And even to Keith's point about the highways, I don't know what took the NDP so long to write to the Auditor General and ask her to look into some of these numbers that we don't really have much information on. I think that the AG hasn't, taken on that study, but I think it's something that she would be able to look into, and that it would be, useful for voters as we come up to the election to really see the numbers behind some of these highway projects.
Yeah, but
so
just
it's
before
a
you
bit
go
of
on
a
that,
sleepy week for the NDP, I think, too.
I just want to ask you on the highway, do we have a sense of whether or not this is being proposed as a P3 project yet?
Well, I guess like right now they're just saying that it's we don't really have specific details on that, but
Right.
we do have there's talk of some bidders already, and that's essentially the line as to why we don't have any financial details, is because they want a competitive bidding process and they'll let the market dictate it. So I think at the end of the day, whoever comes up with the best proposal, but they seem open to everything, like no real specifics on that front right now.
Yeah, because I think if they got into this whole idea about being a P3, it's not unusual for the actual number to come out of the bidding process. I mean, that's the whole point. So that there's skin in the game for the developers, et cetera. So I'd just be curious. I think maybe the whole price tag right now is a bit of a red herring. But anyway, John, sorry, you wanted to jump in.
Well, it's interesting that, reflective of most of the fact that we're talking about just this highway and not a bunch of other stuff. And yes, the optometrist, but it's all policy wonk stuff, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
I mean, this is where we're kind of going. And it took me back. I mean, even last week when we talked about Bill Davis's days and you go into the legislature and all that good stuff, I haven't seen any, and we have to actually explain this to the new generation about brown envelopes. I mean, I haven't seen any. I haven't seen many days, and maybe Sabrina, you have, where the hush is in the legislature, and somebody who's John Fraser stands up or somebody else and says, "Can the premier tell me why this particular minister on this particular day at this particular hotel was doing this?" and sits down. I mean, there's nothing. And what I'm saying is that everybody's on the policy debate. They're not on the personal debate. And what I've seen in most campaigns in history is it's the orange juice in London, England. It didn't matter whether or not everything is triple the price in downtown London for some orange juice. When it was compared to Canadian prices, it cost a cabinet minister their job. It's always that stuff that gets you. And I wonder whether or not part of this is that the opposition is so focused on the policies and the big batting baseball game that's going on there that they're not in the stands with the people and trying to deal with, hey, look, there's something in your popcorn that shouldn't be there. And so I just wonder whether this is all, we're talking about it at one level because we don't have anything. The government has the ability to control the message through social media, and also because of the COVID, they're boxing us all in. They're dictating exactly what we're going to talk about and what we're not going to talk about. And at the opposition itself, on the NDP side, a pretty tired NDP with a leader who's lost a bunch of stuff. On the Liberal side, a leader who's got some real problems in terms of, projection and a bunch of other, you can just see it all lining up. The only thing that sinks governments like this, I think, is, and I'll bring in, Warren Kinsella did this to a whole bunch of different governments. They just find what's in the closet and bring it out and put it, for everybody. And that just derailed everything. So governments go into campaigns believing that, what's that John Belushi thing about it goes in like a lion and comes out like a tiger or something? Remember he was doing the weather? It goes in like this and it comes out like that. Campaigns are like that. They kind of go in one way and they come out another way. It's like, so, but I think the opposition has to look at this government and say, look, this is not a graduate class, in politics. This is, street level retail politics. I'm not sure they're doing it yet.
You hit the nail on the head. Opposition research, it doesn't really exist anymore.
No.
It used to be. The opposition research now is our clippings coming back to us.
Correct.
Our own stories. Hey, someone else in the gallery wrote this. Here's the. That's what they. I remember in the. I know I'm an old man, but I remember opposition leader David Peterson calling me down to his office, pouring me a cup of tea to explain this opposition research. I can't remember the topic, but it was. Here's what we're going to be asking about in question period. Let me explain to you why it's important. Here's what we're going to do, and they had nailed something down. It was really good. That was regular. All of the parties did research, not strategy, not policy, which they did, of course. They did opposition research. The Kinsellas of the world that were freelancing that kind of stuff. They're masters at it, and they can derail campaigns. They can deflect. They can change the agenda so quickly, and it's hardly ever done. I think that's one of the big losses. And, of course, you talked about the Liberals. They don't have the budget for that. They don't have any staff. They don't have, with the loss of official party status, they can't really do any research. So now it's down to the NDP. And I haven't seen them come up with anything really startling other than a list of 14 lawsuits the Tories have lost.
You're not getting brown envelopes full of details like that, I gather, Sabrina.
No, and I do miss them. And Keith is right. I think, even the last time around when Patrick Brown was leader of the PCs, like there were even fun mini scandals sometimes. The rubber duck, that big gigantic rubber duck that everyone ended up loving. They ended up, I think it was an FOI, or they had just found a line item for it, because obviously MPPs, like, they have access to more information than us journalists do. So they can just go and like ask the legislative library for some information that maybe, the public or a reporter can't get. And you get, the price of, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on this inflatable duck. I mean, everyone ended up loving the Ducks. Maybe that one backfired a little bit on the PCs, but they came to us before question period, like, okay, this is what we're going to be asking about, or maybe they would give it to one reporter, and like a reporter could get a scoop and blow it up, kind of thing. Not any of that is really happening, and I wish we'd see more of that. I think that the last thing they were on about was the Ford fundraisers and him throwing big ticket fundraisers, which is all public and, out in the open on the PC's website. I mean, it's maybe not the best look, at these days to be running high ticket fundraisers. But yeah, I mean, the NDP, I think they could pick up the slack a little bit and help us out here.
But there's another point. I got to go back to this. And I don't want to say the old days because it wasn't too long ago, but sometimes the objective of the opposition party is to take a cabinet minister out. I mean, that's what they do. You're going to derail the entire agenda of the government by focusing on a particular minister who's vulnerable, who's bad on their feet. They can't, they've been caught in something. They may not be a major one. They might be a minor one, but nonetheless, the government is forced to thump their desks in the legislature. Day after day, the premier stands up and says, hey, let me tell you about this member. They're forced into that, even though the member may have been caught, doing something that in any other job would have been, dropped down the chute. They're going to defend them all the way to the hill. Well, that takes them completely off every other message that they want. They could say, oh, they're just getting down in the gutter and they're doing all this stuff, but it's effective. It derails. And again, it's the old retail politics that takes it. And I just got to go to one other point. Opposition research, you don't always have to pay for. I mean, you're talking about 11 million people, who see a government, and the objective may be simply, we're going to take them down to a minority. I mean, for God's sake, you can't get a majority of what we've got, but what we're going to do is we're going to take them off at the knees and put them down so they have a hard time walking around the province. And that's how you do this stuff, but it takes kind of the strategy of saying, what game do we want to play, and how do we want to hurt them? What's the outcome of the objective? Because I got to tell you, the NDP right now and the Liberals are shooting for a majority. We might as well get this election over tomorrow. But if you want to go day by day in the trenches and say, we're going to take out that, we're going to take out this, we're going to find some orange juice, we're going to find the expenses, you know what? Some old brown envelopes disguised as emails are going to start showing up.
So, part of this, though, and I think you've all made the point, but I think the idea that they take some assertive or aggressive action in terms of setting their agenda as opposition. The other side of this, though, is, and again, I come back to the 413, is listening to what the general folk, the unwashed, those who aren't in the weeds and doing podcasts on a weekly basis, are actually saying and thinking about this stuff. And there's a lot of people I know who think 413 is a pretty good idea because I'm tired of sitting in the traffic wherever I happen to be in the city. So if it's going to give me relief anywhere, I don't care. Run it through. And they're not hearing that. So to oppose that 413 might be at their peril.
They also want vax mandates, too, and they're not getting those.
Yeah, but let me just throw 2 words into this whole debate. Pickering Airport.
Yeah.
Okay, for somebody who grew up at the 9th line on Highway 7, in Markham, Ontario, where the cornfield across the street at that time. I mean, houses, I sound so old. The Stouffville Markham Hospital wasn't there. None of that. It was just a big farm field. And on that thing, much like you'll find in the Ottawa Valley, keep your hands off my land signs and stuff like that. The Pickering Airport was completely derailed because it was local people. It was the farmers. It was the active people who basically took the town councils and said, if you vote in favor of this, you are gone. And that's how, that's the fire that the Ford government may be playing with. And if I was an opposition leader, I'd be pouring those tea with Keith and I up, in Durham or someplace with some of those folks and getting to know them a little bit better.
Well, it's interesting you should say that because one of the things, the lines Sabrina, I heard the Premier use this week, this is a democracy and the majority of the people have been telling us for years that they want this, and we could have said, vaccine mandate. You just plug that in, right? Because it's the same. Maybe it's overwhelmingly more that they want the vaccine mandate. So it's really interesting. He took that message and made it local and used it to his purpose in that particular case. But if we're listening, okay, why does it work here? And, you're not singing the same song to this choir over here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Premier, but that's just kind of the Premier style at the end of the day. He just kind of barrels through and he's going to tell us he's hearing what he's hearing, and that's that. I think, at the end of the day, though, people are kind of suffering. They're not getting all the information they need from him. But I think that it's just going to be another 6 months of this until election day. And I don't know if there's a Ford Fest. I would love to go and talk to the folks there because they're it's also really fascinating to hear from them too. I know the Premier was kind of had to defend some of his comments about immigration. And when he was doing that, he brought up, Ford Fest is so diverse as part of, his defense of those comments. But he's not wrong there. I mean, they really are diverse. And that's, I think, maybe one crowd that I'd be interested to go hear from, just as they're closing out one mandate and potentially starting another.
Capital F folks.
Well, let me make one prediction, and that's for maybe the short term, maybe over the next month. And that is when a question comes about long-term care. So, Mr. Premier, when are you going to make sure that X or Y is put in place? And he'll say, you know what, you're focused on long-term care, but let me talk to you about getting to long-term care in a car. And the 413 could do this. And then it's going to be the next question, which is going to say, talk to us about hospital rates and vaccinations. Say, well, you know what, let me talk to you about getting to those vaccinations and making sure that people can get there on time to our hospitals. And I got to tell you, the 413, I tell you, it's not it. That's it. It's going to be a question in and it's going to be a thing out. And the question will be between now and, January, whether or not, we get any other issues on the agenda. And the only way to derail that is to find something that's bigger and more personal.
Well, let's leave it at that. Thanks. There was lots to talk about considering there was a constituency week. So we'll get back at it again. Sabrina and Angie from the Queen's Park Observer, John Wright, Keith Leslie, I'm Dave Trafford, and this is On the Ledge. It's an Eye Contact production.